This program was first broadcast on Canterbury's access media station, Plains FM, and was made with the assistance of New Zealand On Air.
Now it's time for Spiritual Learning with Priestess Lilly.
My radio show, Priestess Lilly, Sacred Heart Healer, Space Holder, Spiritual Life Coach. Hi, I'm Priestess Lilly. Welcome. This radio show podcast I've created to help assist humanity rise the consciousness through connection and holding space for thought-activating conversations with heart-centered leaders, wisdom keepers, and divine humans expanding into their authenticity and soul purpose. The sacred vessel is a soulful activation, a recalling, a reclaiming parts of ourselves that we have forgotten in order for us to heal and walk in the cyclic nature of ourselves, Mother Earth, and the universal cosmic energy. Monica is a breathwork facilitator, sound healing, massage and bodywork, energy healer, yoga, and meditation. It is her mission to support you in becoming your own healer, guiding you to heal your trauma and core wounds, and relieve stress and anxiety from within so that you can step fully into your full potential and live your best life. Up until 3 years ago, she struggled severely with anxiety, depression, panic attacks, and an inability to speak. She felt stressed, overwhelmed by her own emotions, and was in a constant state of fear. She never felt good enough and was afraid of not fitting in. And so she tried desperately to be someone that she thought would be loved and accepted by others. She felt alone and disconnected from herself and from everyone around her. And it's from here that she shares openly her journey to heal. Welcome. I'm so glad that when I reached out to you, you accepted my invitation to come on my podcast, because I've sneakily been checking you out for quite some time.
Yeah, I was definitely taken back of like, oh, what is this in my mailbox? And it was, quite exciting. I was like, oh, this is something new. So I was definitely really keen to jump on and explore the space together.
Definitely. So I know that your work, you've been traveling through New Zealand, and your work is around trauma and helping people feel into their wounds and, basically realizing that they even have trauma.
Yeah.
I don't think some of us even realize we're the shit that we're carrying.
Yeah. A lot of us, we have that stuff on the surface that we kind of know is there, like the big T's and this maybe happened a few months ago or in the last year, but we don't really acknowledge all the stuff from the get-go, from even the stuff from when we've been in the womb to coming into that 0 to 7 years. And then all the stuff that happens in school, like school wasn't easy for me. I know it wasn't easy for a lot of people. And there's just all these layers that we carry with us. So if you think about like that 0 to 7 period, we're already starting to have these different wounds and belief systems being developed, and then we start to create the layers from that space. And so if you think about your age now, that's years and years of stuff. And my journey has taken me through many of those layers. But it's such a blessing now to be able to help others do that.
Yeah. So tell me about your story, because, I'm a believer we don't just fall into this work. It basically is our own journey of healing and for us to be able to hold space and, you know, really, really deepen into that sacred container to give to others. So what is your personal journey around trauma?
Yeah, so I definitely resonate with that. So I do have some modalities that I work with, but I do find it's that life experience that gives you the highest qualification of working with certain people, is because that you've actually been through it. And when you go through it yourself and when you do the deep work, you resonate with people, you can relate to them, and you can really hold them through their journey because they start to trust you because they're like, yep, she gets me. She's gone through it as well. And so I feel like having that experience, as hard as it was for me, going through it, I now realize I went through that in order to serve. So I always knew from a really young age that I was going to be in the way of service. I wanted to help people, and I just would always try and learn things as fast as I could so I could help the next person. And so now as I reflect back on my journey and all those tough times that I was just like, why am I going through this? Why is this happening to me? It all makes sense now. It's like the dots start to come together and you're like, oh yes, now I have this life experience where I can help that next person that's going through those deep ends and those shadows. So for me, it was starting quite early on, and I had no idea why I was experiencing what I was experiencing. And it took me many years to uncover what was even going on. But I struggled with, in early adolescence, deep states of depression, anxiety, especially social anxiety, and intense panic attacks. So I would often have in the school grounds someone coming up to me and just saying something simple like, hello, how are you, or whatever it was. But as soon as someone would speak to me, if I didn't really know them, I would go into an intense stress response that would just overwhelm me, and I would completely choke up. And I would have my head would be overthinking all the things I could say, but I couldn't get anything out. And people thought I was weird, and it became a game of like, say this, say that, say this. And I was literally having an intense panic attack inside, but I would hide behind a smile. And so no one knew anything was wrong. I had a very, very good mask until it got to points where it would kind of bottle up and explode. But I would hide behind this smile, and yeah, I would go home and feel really depressed, be listening to depressing music, and I'd have a lot of anxiety attacks. And I just never really understood why. And I started to have suicidal thoughts as well, because I was like, I can't live like this. I don't want to be here. Someone's put me here to suffer. This is like hell for me. And I had no idea where it was coming from. And it got to a point where I was like, I've had enough of this kind of ideas and thinking about what could I do to escape this reality. And I put it out there. I didn't know who I was talking to. I spoke to God, because that's what I kind of went to a Christian school, and I was like, maybe there's someone out there that can hear me and help me. And it was just like a begging of, please, someone help me. I'm open to anything. Yeah. And it was literally the next day that my sister came over, was like, oh, I'm going to go and look for a Buddhist book at this store. And I was like, I'm coming with you. This is my sign. I know it. And back then I didn't know too much about signs. I didn't really believe in that, but I was like, this has to be it, because what else is there, kind of thing. And from there, I picked up my first spiritual book. And then from there, my whole life got redirected. And that's where the spiritual journey began. And I started to uncover all the infinite possibilities and what could actually be out there, and why I was experiencing what I was experiencing. And one of the biggest things for me was that throat chakra, that how do I find that confidence? How can I connect and speak? And I always knew that I wanted to use my voice and I wanted to serve. And so that really led me on the journey of, where are we? What's going on? It was about 3 years ago that I found breathwork, and I stumbled into this. I wasn't looking for it. It was another dark time when I was just like, nothing's working anymore. Stumbled into this workshop, and that's where I really started to step into my power, my confidence, and find my voice.
Oh my God, I can resonate with everything that you just shared. When I was just sitting there listening to you, I was, I think, this work, we know at a young age that we're here to serve humanity.
Yeah.
Definitely. I knew for myself, but to what that looked like, I didn't know. And I still think right now I'm trying to work that piece of the jigsaw out, to some degrees. But when you were talking about seeing signs and, the bookshop, I remember that just instantly took me back to a space when I was in my dark night of the soul stuff, in my first marriage with my husband, in a very traumatizing relationship at the time, but, not knowing that was what it was. And I remember I was praying to God, praying to my nana in spirit. And I remember walking into a bookshop, Whitcoulls in Dunedin, and a book literally fell off the shelf. And that was probably, there were several activations over those 7 years with that beautiful husband, but that was one of those activations that, it's a sign. I picked up the book. I'm dyslexic. I don't bloody read, but it really, I bought it. And it was part of that, part of the journey, part of that activation, part of that needing me to move.
Yeah, it was so funny when I was in this bookstore. I remember it as if it was yesterday, and I was so kind of lost, I don't even know where to start. I ended up picking up 3 books, and there was one that was just way too out there that I was reading. It was like, this can't be real. This is too incredible to be real. I had to put it down. It was so overwhelming. And then the 3rd book had all these huge scientific words, and I'm like, I don't even understand every second word that this person is saying. So I put that one down, and it was the 3rd book. And it was the Celestine Prophecy. And it just, yeah. And every time I share that with people, they're like, oh my God, that was one of my first books. And it was just, one of those ones that just completely transformed my life and redirected. And it was interesting because it dropped, opened me up to almost I was just on top of the world. I was high on life for that first, maybe I think it was 4 to 6 months. And then all of a sudden snapped back into went into that dark night of the soul. And it was what happened? Where's my high gone?
And I think that's the thing that, just talking about spirituality before we talk and, move into breath work and your work today, I think that's the thing that people actually, we're always evolving. When I look now, and obviously I'm older than you, I look at, there wasn't one moment that awakened me. There were probably 5 real deep activation points, but in between those pieces of the jigsaw was some real dark night of the soul, down on the floor, crying my eyes out to get to where I needed to get to that next part of my evolved self, or that next part of letting go and learning something deeper. And I think this is what we forget. We think that we get there and we're a finished product. Let me just get healed and I'm a finished product. I'll just do this never a finished product.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that. I remember telling Mum when I was on my spiritual high buzz of, Mum, I'm going to reach enlightenment and I'm going to be free of all this pain. I'm never going to have to feel it again. And she was like, I don't think that's right. I'm like, no, Mum, I'm going to get there and it's going to be done. I won't have to feel pain anymore. And it's been quite a funny journey because it's been the same for me, where there's been these pivotal points, but in between those has been these waves of dark night of the soul where you go deep down, then you come back up for a breath, and then you go back in and you come up for a breath. For me, it feels because I recently gave birth, it feels like birth. It feels like that contraction of oh, this is really intense. I don't know if I'm going to get through this. And then it eases up, you get that breath, and then you go back in. And especially the past, I'd say probably, especially the last month, it's been the same thing again, where I'm actually, because of all the work I've done, I'm going into deeper layers, but I'm so observant of it now, where I'm like, wow, this is really intense. But because of all the work I've done, I'm able to hold the space for it, where I can be in dissociation in that trauma response, but be observant of it. So it's I'm present, but dissociate at the same time. And it's this kind of, I can feel the energy moving and contracting and expanding. And it's exactly what you said. You go in and you have these dark nights, but you always come back out. And you have that expansion, and it's this sigh of relief. And I think that's where you get to experience the bliss, because you've gone through that depth, and then you come out and you're like, oh, now I can truly appreciate what's here because I've gone into those depths.
Oh, I love what you've just shared. Oh, and you know what? I totally agree. I get pretty fired up on my in my private Facebook group, those poor ladies in there, but they keep showing up and listening, so I must be hitting a note. But when right now, with the collective energy and being seeing it and all of its dysfunction and all of its display, and almost being like that observer from that person outside of it, and knowing and holding that space for people to awaken. It's a real it's quite fascinating to be part of the journey right now and to actually bear witness to it.
Yeah, that's what I'm noticing as well for me. I feel like I'm in the trenches, but I'm also like above it and like watching at the same time. And I'll be going through phases where I'm like having my own deep experience, but I'm also holding space for other people's deep experience. And then I'm witnessing it all. And it's like all these incredible layers of life. And it's so bizarre and fascinating.
It is, isn't it? But I feel like it's the layers of our consciousness that is really exposed right now. Layers of our consciousness, layers of our beliefs, our conditioning, that is really where before we could probably hide some of that crap, which is really now being brought to the forefront. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what a lot of my work is as well, is that so many people come to me and they're not even aware of what those core beliefs or those core programs that are running. They're not really aware of all the trauma that they have. A lot of us, we know of a few things, like I mentioned earlier. But it's like these deep core layers that we're still awakening to.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Love it. Totally. So going back to you and your own personal journey, because I can really resonate with a lot of what you've shared on tenfold. And, not many people sign up to actually do their work. They think they're doing their work, but they're just shimmying around the edges.
I've been there.
I've been there too. I go and meditate, get the message, don't like the message, avoid meditation for a couple of months, go back, get the message, go, it hasn't changed.
Yeah.
How did you expand and almost, I want to say, because I get healing's an ongoing journey, but really deepen and move through, because obviously it was breath work and obviously it's some of the work that you're bringing to the table right now. What was the key game changer for you?
Yeah, the thing that's coming up for me is the permission to feel. So for a long time, I didn't feel like I had the right to feel what I was feeling because others had it worse off than me. I had a roof over my head. I was fed. My parents were still together. I knew they loved me. And I was like, nothing truly, like if I were to share some things, it'd be like, oh, that's pretty traumatic. But for me, I was like, oh, I haven't really gone through that much. Being quite sensitive and empathic from such a young age, it's like I would hear all these other things that were happening in the world and it would just hurt me so deeply. And I was like, there's so much more going on for others. I don't have the right to be depressed. I don't have the right to have this anxiety. I should be able to speak. There's obviously something wrong with me, is what I had playing in my head. And so because I didn't feel validated in what I was feeling, I never allowed myself to feel or express myself. And that was, again, coming to the throat, was shut down from such a young age where I didn't feel right to express being joyful. I didn't feel right. I felt a lot of shame around pleasure and feeling good, but I also didn't feel like I had the right to feel bad. So I end up finding these ways to numb out and dissociate. And so when you're numbing out and dissociated, you're disconnected and you don't feel a lot. And it's a pretty rough place to be. And what I found was on my journey, I was reading a lot of books, I was doing yoga and meditation, but it was from a space of spiritually bypassing. And I was escaping my pain. It was another way to numb out. So when I was in the spiritual space and when I was doing yoga, I felt high on life. When that wasn't working, I went to alcohol and partying. So I felt high in a low space. And then when I'd come out of that, I started beating myself up and all the shame of like, oh, you shouldn't have said that. You shouldn't have done this. Or you're so embarrassing, playing these repetitive patterns. And I'd go for months in between the two. So a few months of partying, a few months of spiritually bypassing. And they both get quite intense, where I was just so disconnected, where it got to a point that nothing was working. And then again, I called out. I was like, I need some help. Like, hey, I'm over here. And that's when, so there was a few synchronicities that lined up. I was living, because I'm from Perth in Australia, so I was living there. I started working with some seminar companies that were doing personal development, more of the like masculine kind of energy of structure of like NLP and all of that kind of stuff. And it wasn't in full alignment, but it was kind of the steps that got me to where I am today. And so one company led me to another company, which led me to move to the Gold Coast. And it was literally, the mentor was like, you should be in the Gold Coast so you can be closer to us and start working with us. And I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. And a week later, I was on a plane. Well, when I got to the Gold Coast, all of that stuff fell apart. But I met my partner that weekend that I moved there. And that was like that synchronicity, because he had worked with both of these companies and he'd actually introduced these companies, which led to me moving to the Gold Coast. And when I was on the Gold Coast, I didn't know anyone. And so I was just looking for some spiritual groups to make some friends. And I signed up to a breathwork workshop, and I thought it was a meditation, and I had a rude awakening. So I had no idea what I had signed up for. And I get so many people now come to my workshops that think they're coming for a nice relaxing meditation. I'm like, oh, you're in for a rude awakening too. So I totally get it. But yeah, it was in that workshop where all of a sudden this loud music came on. I was like, what's going on? And she's like, breathe in this way. And I was like, okay. And so I'm breathing and all this stuff starts to arise. And I'm like, what is this feeling? Like my whole body was cramping up. There was this weight on my chest. I was like fighting back tears at the most intense way possible. Like it was just, incredibly intense. And I was just like, no, I'm not feeling this. And then she placed her hand on my heart and it just burst out. And I started bawling my eyes out. My whole body was like tremoring and shaking. And I was not in control of this. It was just happening. And I was just so present. I had no idea why I was feeling what I was feeling. I was just in that present moment. And then after it released, I left my body and had the most blissful experience that I've ever experienced. As I've reflected on that, I kind of feel like what I was experiencing was too intense that I left my body. And so it was a way to escape that. Yeah. But it was also incredibly beautiful. So it wasn't a completely, it wasn't a bad thing at all. But I do notice now that I reflected and I was like, oh yeah, I didn't feel safe in my body. I didn't feel safe to express. And so I left. But that experience opened me up to a whole new world. And I was like, I need to understand this. Being a very logical, over-analyzing person, I was like, I need to know exactly what happened. And again, I just kind of put it out there and I forgot about breathwork for a little bit. My partner was really into it and took me to another one. And when I went to that one, I was completely shut down because I was so in fear to express myself in front of him. He was in his own journey. He did not care at all. But in my head, I was like, I cannot make sound. I cannot move. I cannot express myself in front of him because of fear of judgment and the shame around that. And so again, I was like, I need to understand this. And funnily enough, a practitioner training opened up. And when I went on this training, there was the most incredible facilitator who was the first person to meet me in a way that I needed to be met in order to create that internal safety. Because what I realized was I just didn't feel safe in my body. And so I was always dissociated. I was never really here, never really in the present. So as I started to learn how to come back into the present, learning how to create that internal safety and to give myself permission to feel, that's where things shifted. Because that's a big thing. What I find is, we can do yoga and meditation and all these beautiful things, and they definitely have helped me. I'm not saying that they didn't do anything at all. They were really supportive on my journey. But what I found was that permission to feel and to feel safe to feel was those pivotal moments, was like, snap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm hearing everything you said, girl. Absolutely everything. And I think, when I feel into right now, what I'm noticing is the collective energy, and just through what you've shared, we are so numbed out. We're so in a numbing energy right now, and too scared to grieve, too scared to speak, too scared, it's like we're in overwhelm, but, we feel overwhelmed, but I think we're actually over suppressed. That, it's becoming this over suppressed. If I just don't feel it, if I numb it, I don't have to acknowledge it. I don't have to work on it. I don't have to be it. I don't have to feel it. I don't have to heal it. I don't have to da. Would you agree?
Yeah, totally. And especially I feel like the last couple of years have pushed people out of that comfort zone of suppression.
Yeah.
And it's forced people to feel, but when it gets so overwhelming and those coping mechanisms are so strong, it does send you sometimes even deeper into shutdown, even deeper into that armor, because it's so overwhelming. And I have a lot of clients that come to me as well, and there's this resistance to go within and to feel, because it's like, if I feel this, I may not survive. If I go into this, I may not be able to get back out. And that was a big thing for me. It's like, if I let myself feel this pain, I won't survive it. And what I found actually is when I allowed myself to feel it, that's when it dissolved like that.
Yeah.
And it's so crazy, because it's the resistance that creates the lingering and the detrimental effects. Yeah. But when we actually find that safe space and that person that can hold you where you're at, I'm not here to force anyone to do anything. But what I found with this particular facilitator that did my training with me, she didn't force anything. She didn't push me. She didn't wrong me. I've had teachers that have you're the reason why you're not healing, because you're not willing to do this. You're resisting and it's your fault. And this teacher was the first person to be like, I feel you. I'm just going to hold you and I'm going to support you. She literally, when I was frozen, everyone else around me was moving and making all these weird sounds. And I was like, I can't do that. It's like, I was so embarrassed to do that myself. And she just put her hands on me and she helped me to move my body. She encouraged the sound. And when I wanted to forgive, because she was like, what do you want to say? I was like, I forgive you. I forgive you. And this was someone that hurt me. She's like, no, we're not there yet. How about we actually start to say no and get into that raw experience of anger and just let yourself be with what's here. So it wasn't wronging my feelings. It was actually finally getting my feelings validated. You have the right to feel this. And that was huge. And so that's what I really aim to do now, is to meet people where they're at and take it little by little. It's like, we don't have to rip the Band-Aid off. We can, but we can just take it at that step by step, because it can feel so overwhelming. And those coping, defense, numbing out mechanisms are so strong. And we don't want to kind of rip them away, dive too deep, get re-traumatized, where we make those coping mechanisms even stronger.
Yeah, totally agree. And I feel, just through the work that I do, it's for me, it's like people get seen for the first time, but then they start showing emotion and then they go, I don't know why I'm crying. And I'm like, and for me, I go, it's a natural part of the experience. It's okay to let it be. If it needs to flow out of you, or it will get stuck.
I actually love when people don't know why, because you kind of attach to it, which means it doesn't linger and get stuck again.
I'm like, you've got to let it go, baby. Just let it go. Whatever it looks like. Whether it be an ugly roar or like a whatever, you've got to let it out. Otherwise it gets stuck. And when energy's stuck, that creates disease.
Yeah. And the ego and the thinking mind likes to attach to, what does this mean? I need to understand and explain it. But I find what I really love with the breath work is that you're so present with your body and the experience that you're just letting all the stuck energy move and flow. So you don't actually know why you're crying or why you're angry. Sometimes you do, and sometimes it does come up. I find if you need to know, and that's going to support you to move it and to release it. Because like I said, some people know the big things that they're dealing with, but then there's all these other layers that they were not aware of. And we don't actually need to know exactly why we're crying or why we're laughing or why we're shaking. And it can just be, let's just move it through. Because sometimes when you do attach to it and then it actually gets restuck.
Yeah, and you just need to release it and allow it to flow, like that feminine energy, just allow it to flow through you and just send it away for healing, send it to Mother Earth, send it to where it needs to go.
Yeah, and I always say as well with Mother Earth, she doesn't judge energy, because I have sometimes people like, oh, I feel guilty passing on my negative or my dark energy to Earth. And she's like, well, energy's just energy. She'll just transmute that and send it where it's needed. And I find if we were to come into that space of, what we're feeling isn't bad or good, it's just energy, and we can just let it flow freely, so that when we do start to feel the challenging emotions, we can let it flow rather than attaching to it, resisting it, and it getting stuck and it lingers for so much longer. And the same with the positive, we can enjoy it and allow that flow, but not attach to it where we start to chase it and create suffering that way. It's just, let's just play and be with all the experiences and the emotions and all that it means to be human. You do become more in this flow state.
Yeah. And I love that. All that it means, what you just said, all that it is to be human.
Yeah. And that's why we're here. I find often, you hear people say, how would we know what good is without having something that's considered bad? Or how would we know, I feel like that's why we came here, and that's what we're here to experience, because when you're all that pure oneness, beautiful energy, you can't know yourself because you're just that energy. So you come here and you experience the polarity so you can, really have that gratitude and appreciation and that depth of experience.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. And so with your breath work and your ceremonies, for those that are listening, do you want to, how's that process?
Yeah. So we usually pair cacao ceremony, biodynamic breathwork, and sound healing. So I like to start the work with cacao ceremony. So I found cacao was probably one of the first things in my journey. So about 7 years ago now that I met grandmother cacao. And it was absolutely mind-blowing when I found it. It was one of those guided moments where I found a workshop and it was doing cacao, and I'd never experienced it before. And what I found was that I was just, that journey from head to heart happened almost instantaneously. And I felt grounded in my body. I felt safe. I felt supported. For the first time, I didn't feel alone, and I felt safe to be open. And it was a women's workshop where it was cacao breast massage and a kind of like a heart sharing as well. And so for me, I was still quite shy and anxious at this stage. So it was very out of my comfort zone. But I found when I was in the space, as soon as I had this cacao, it all just kind of relaxed and I felt really safe. And I started to have cacao regularly after that. And I found I would just drop into this deep meditative state without trying, and being that overthinker where my thoughts were just rampant all the time. And to just be, I remember sitting at the dining table with my cacao, and there's all this kind of chaotic energy around me, but I was in my own little bubble. I felt deeply supported. And for the first time, I wasn't alone with my pain. And so it's been a journey where I've it was actually quite fascinating. As I would go into my dark nights of the soul, I would forget that she existed. And then as I started to come into the light, I was like, oh, cacao. And I would have this remembering. It was quite a beautiful experience. As I would remember who I am and where I am and what was going on, this remembrance of cacao would come through, and I'm like, I'm here to support you. I was like, oh, yes. And I find when you pair cacao with breath work, you get that gladness, that support, that feeling of I'm safe, so that when we go into the breath work, you feel like you're held and you can go that much deeper because there's that sense of safety. So I find that's a really important part. She has also so many other beautiful benefits, but also that journey from head to heart, because a lot of the time it's the head that prevents us from going within and from feeling and journeying. So if we can get that in the beginning, then you're almost like primed, ready to go into the breath work. With the breath work, we start to bring that in, and I do quite an extensive introduction to the breath work because there is quite a lot that can come up. and it can be quite intense. So I like people to know exactly what might come up, not that it all will, but just to have that awareness. And so when they go into the journey, and so often people are like, oh, if you didn't tell me that was going to happen, I would have freaked out. So it gives that element of like, look, we've got you. We're holding this space. Being that deeply empathic, sensitive person, I can feel what's kind of going on in the space. But yeah, so I go into that a bit. And then we start to breathe. So with the breath work, it's usually about 60 minutes that we're breathing. And we're working with biodynamic breathwork trauma release system. This was developed by Giten Tonkov. It's a US based company, but they were traveling worldwide doing retreat practitioner trainings, which was just incredible. But what I found with this one, I was able to really stay present in my body. So I didn't have, like I said, that first experience, I left my body. So this was the first, this is a really grounded one where we start to really aim to work with that safety, staying in the body, coming into a connected breath. And what I find happens when you come into the connected breath, it's almost like that gateway opens up and it takes you from the conscious into the subconscious, into the nervous system and the body. And you start to realize just where the stuck energy is. And you're like, whoa, I didn't even know it was there. Kind of like when you go for a massage, you're like, wow, I didn't know that was sore. This is like that, but on a whole nother level. So you get like tingling and tension. And I find if there's something that you're struggling with in life, if there's a particular area that gets really tight or really painful, or if there's anxiety or something that's going on, sometimes we'll feel that in the body quite intensely with the breath work, because what's happening is we're now allowing the space to feel what's within us. We're no longer numbing it or dulling it and trying to escape it. We're now giving it our full presence, acknowledgement, and allowing ourselves to feel it. So it can be quite intense at first. A lot of emotion can be quite overwhelming. But what I find, like I said earlier, when you allow yourself to go there, it doesn't last as long. So it's not like it's days and months of lingering of the pain that we're experiencing. You can go into it and experience it for literally 90 seconds and then it's gone. It's quite incredible. And what I find as well is that you move in these waves. I always really trust that your body knows exactly what you can handle and what you're ready for. And what tends to happen is you'll start to activate the body and you'll come up in this wave where you'll start to reach this point where there's a lot of energy pulsating in your body, and you'll start to use physical movement, your voice and touch to start to move that energy through. A lot of the time there's shaking and toning. And then you'll have this big release. Sometimes there's emotion, and then you'll start to come back down and you'll have that moment where you get to rest and relax, and you almost go into these peaceful, blissful states of being. And then you'll usually go for another round. Some people have one really big round where it's a big build up, a big release. And then by the time they're coming down, we're finishing the journey. But often it's these like little bell curves, and it's quite magical. It's one of those ones where you really need to experience it to know exactly what it's like. And another thing I love about it is that every single journey is completely unique. And every journey that you have yourself will always be different. And so when we go around the circle and we start to share, it's just amazing that we've guided about 2,000 people now, and every single journey has been completely unique. Sometimes you have absolutely pleasurable, joyful experiences. Sometimes it can be quite painful and intense, but then you come out at the end and you've never felt more blissful or peaceful in your life. Often I hear some people saying, oh, it feels like I got hit by a truck, but in a good way, because it's finally you're allowing yourself to do a lot of like that deep work, and it takes energy to move energy. So it can feel quite tiring, exhausting, but there's this new sense of inner peace and spaciousness. And then from that space, we bring in the sound healing. So we work with crystal singing bowls. My partner Liam plays the didgeridoo. We've got medicine drums and chimes, and we bring all of that in intuitively. So we're always just guiding the space intuitively. I don't plan any of it. It's we kind of move from cacao, breath to sound, but that's kind of the structure. And then the rest of it's just like, let's see what comes through. But we bring in these instruments to support clearing any energy that's been released that's still kind of lingering. It starts to flush it through. And it almost takes you into this kind of trance hypnotic state where you can drop into that peace and you can really anchor in the new vibration, the new state of being. it's almost like an energetic cleanse and a bath where you get to just rest and relax. And yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And then I find we always do sharing at the end of our journeys, and it can be sometimes the most confronting for people where they're like, oh, I'm not going to want to share. I'll do the journey, but I'm not going to want to share. But it's quite crazy. Once you go through a journey like this, even though you've been in your own journey, there's this collective energy that happens. We become one in the space where we're going through our own individual journey, but we are also holding space and co-creating the safe space together, that we feel like a family at the end of it. And it feels so much more safer to be vulnerable and to be open. And often when people start to share and allow themselves to be seen and heard and to really express out loud, the healing is just transformational. Emotion will come up, insights will come up. And it's just, yeah, that kind of cherry on the top of like, wow.
I think we've got this perception, and I love everything that you've shared. I absolutely love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. I think we've got this perception that to heal, it must look like this. It must look like going to see a counselor, taking some medication, da. And I'm not saying that that's not right, because to some people, that is completely right. But really, to embody healing, it is an expression of all elements of self, your physical, mental, emotional, spiritual body. So when you speak what you say just then, like your sacred spaces, the work that you do, like I really connect with it. I get it, because like I don't think we're one-dimensional. I think we're a frequency.
Yeah. And I love that you brought that up, because even with the work that I do, I often have people that will come in, and even people that say, oh, I don't have any expectations around it. A lot of the time we do, and we have an idea of what it should look like. And if someone had an experience that I didn't have, I must have got it wrong. Mm-hmm. So like if I didn't have this big cathartic release and I didn't cry or get emotional, it didn't work. Or if I felt nothing, it didn't work. And for me, especially with my own journey, I know that's not true. I find that exactly what is meant to come up will come up. Because what I find is really incredible is that the body knows what you do in daily life, of how you cope with stuff, and it's going to show you. So if you dissociate a lot, if you numb out a lot, your body's going to show you that, and you're going to experience it. If you get frustrated at the process in life, you're going to get frustrated in breath work. Mm-hmm. If you are really emotional, sometimes you actually need to come into the space to give yourself a break, and you need to relax. Because some people, they don't go too deep with the layers per se, but they have a completely relaxing, blissful experience. And often it's the ones that say, can I come in and can I be really angry and can I swear? And I'm like, yeah, it's all welcome in the space. We're not here to judge. All of you is welcome. If you need to swear, let it out. And it's usually them that have the most peaceful journeys, because they're already angry in their daily life. They're using a lot of energy to be in that frequency. So now when they come in here, it's like, oh, I can actually just take a load off and just be. And it's often the ones that don't express a lot out in daily life. They'll come into the journey like, oh, that won't happen to me. And then it all happens. And it's quite powerful. But like I said, there's so many infinite possibilities of what can happen when you come into the workshop. And it's letting go of what we think it should look like. And I often go into that when we're setting the intention. It's like, let's set our intention, but also be open to how this intention can come through. So let's let go of the expectations, any attachments, and focus on how you want to feel. But also know that if you focus, say, if you wanted to feel peace, your intention is, I want to feel more peaceful. Anything that's preventing that's going to come up. So maybe you start to feel really frustrated, really angry, and you're like, I chose peace. But it's like this had to come up first to be released in order to create space for peace.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And like, just as you're speaking, I get it. I have people that come for readings, and with the intention of whatever their intention is for coming, and that they've got it fixated in their mind that someone's going to come through and it's going to look like this person. And I go, oh yeah, and they go, and then at the end of the reading, it might have been someone that completely oppositely didn't want to come through, and they're like, oh, we're so wanting, da 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 to come through, and I'm like, yeah, you're wanting them to come through because you're wanting them to just agree with you and say everything's going to be okay. But this other person's the person that would challenge you in order for you to move for your higher self. So I completely get it. Like, and it's funny what we perceive, isn't it?
Yeah, and a lot of the time we seek comfort and over what's actually going to be serving our highest good. And it's funny with comfort, it's not always what's comfortable, because what I noticed on my journey, depression, anxiety, panic, was actually my comfort zone. It was my emotional home. And I had to learn how to break free of that and create a new emotional home. So even though I was saying, I don't want to feel this anymore, it's what I knew. And we like the familiar. So I would always go back because it's what I knew. And so I had to create a new emotional home and start to push myself out of that. And it was quite fascinating, because what I was saying I wanted actually wasn't really what I wanted, because I had to put myself out there and embrace vulnerability and the what if it doesn't work out the way I want it kind of feeling. And I noticed in that journey that I was actually suppressing and avoiding joy, pleasure, feeling good, because there was this fear that can be taken away. What happens when the shoe drops, or when it doesn't work out anymore, or like if I'm feeling so good and then someone tears me down? It's easier just to be down already. So that was quite a fascinating journey of like, when you start to, you set your intentions of, I want to go into my comfort zone, rather than actually over here might serve you on a greater level and take you a lot deeper on your growth and your evolution.
Yeah, I totally hear you, sister. I totally hear you. I know that the people that are listening to this, I always set the intention that what is it that we need to know for our highest good, and it's sometimes, most of the time, it's not what we want to hear.
Yeah. And I love intentions. I've been playing a little deeper with intention setting since the end of last year. And because I have this awareness now that when I'm setting an intention, anything that's preventing the intention is going to come up to open that space. And so I found my intention setting has been incredibly powerful and intense the past, 7 months. I've been setting it every month, and it's been really crazy because it's taken me so much deeper than it ever has before. I've always played with or explored with intention setting, but yeah, especially the last 7 months, because I've been open to go to the uncomfortable. I've been open to do that deep healing, because that's my life now. I find it quite amazing. Even with my workshops, I'm journeying alongside my clients. So I'm open to doing my own work to be able to hold deeper space to take my clients deeper. And so it was really fascinating. I think it was last year, I set a workshop in place. I was doing bi-monthly online cacao ceremonies. And so I set them for 2 months in advance, and I was doing a cacao ceremony in inner child healing. And as soon as I clicked publish on that event, I was doing 2 months of inner child work. And I was like, oh my God, this is freaking intense. It was not what I was anticipating. Everything that was coming into my life, like books and workshops and teachers and trainings and insights and experiences that I was having, was all inner child work. So I started healing my little children from the ages from 0 to kind of 12, I would say, was parts of me that were coming through, all these different insights being channeled from who knows where, but all of this deep healing coming up for 2 months. And by the time I got to the workshop, I was ready.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, like, that's how this place rolls for me too. I find that because I'm going through change and transition right now, a death and a rebirth process. And it is fascinating. It's that thing, be careful what you wish for.
That's exactly what I was hearing in my head. I was going to say, like, careful what you wish for, because when you put it out there, the universe will deliver, and it's not always in the way that you thought it would. Yeah, totally. But I always find that openness and that willingness to go within and to feel and to go through those layers, the greater gifts and the greater rewards that you receive. But when you're kind of like in that more ego space, and there's nothing wrong with the ego, but when you are in that space, and you're kind of like, this is how it's going to be. And it's like you're, trying to control everything. I'd find the rewards aren't as great because you're actually in that resistance where you've got a longer way to go before you kind of pop out the other side. But yeah, for me, when I was in that space of resistance and trying to control everything, it just took so much longer than when I finally learned to surrender. And surrender for me was one of the hardest things because I was quite a control freak, overanalyzer, very logical, and was like, just tell me steps 1, 2, and 3 to surrender and I'll do those steps. And that's not quite what surrender is.
No, definitely not. And, I always say when I surrender, I go, what else is, there's always more to surrender. Just when I think I've got there, I'm like, no. There's something else under this, and then there's something else under that, and there's something else under that. It's a layer effect. We've got to keep going deeper in order to, get to, the nitty gritty, basically, of what it is that we, our work, what it is we're here to birth into the world, the next phases of ourselves, the next best version of ourselves. I think you go.
What I found as well with that journey, the first probably, I'm going to say 5 to 6 years of these layers of going through were really challenging for me, and I just didn't enjoy the journey. And I was just like, I have my destination in mind, and I found I was not enjoying trying to get there. But what I found was when I was able to start allowing myself to feel and express and giving myself that permission, going into that deeper sense of surrender. And I found actually for me, my pregnancy was where, and like first it was breathwork, but then pregnancy came about 4 months after my training. And it was just a deeper level of learning to surrender. But there was this shift that happened. I think it was just after I'd birthed little Theo, and it was probably after the 4th trimester when you start to come out into the light again. There was this shift that happened for me where I was like, wow, I've arrived, and I started to enjoy the journey. And it was like, I'm no longer seeking a specific destination. I'm actually just riding these waves, and I'm seeing what's coming next, and I'm just open to that flow.
So our time together is nearly coming to a beautiful end. What insight, sacred share, would you like, for those that are listening, would you like to leave them with?
I feel like it's really around that permission to feel, and just knowing that whatever is going on for you, it's okay to feel that, and you have a right to feel what's going on inside, because I think that's what held me back for so long and made the ride or the journey so much more challenging and rocky, was that I just didn't feel like I had a right to feel. So if we can find that safe space where you can be okay with feeling what's inside and just start to move at your own pace, like there's no rush. You don't need to rush your healing, but just being open to ride that journey, to let go of the destination, ride the journey, and just let yourself feel.
I love that. That's a powerful message, sister. And those that are listening, how do they find you? How do they find and seek out your work and connect with you, girl?
Yeah, so everything is under my name, so pretty easy. MoniqueCarmela.com. On Facebook, it's facebook.com/Monique Carmela. Instagram, it's Monique_Carmela.
Yeah, I'll put all those links up. Thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, sharing your journey, being vulnerable, being present. You are so grounded, girl. You are so grounded. Just thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's been an awesome conversation. It's so amazing when you meet other people that are just ready to be in the open space, intuitive, just follow what comes through. And so there's no real structure, but just kind of following whatever arises. And because I never know what's going to come through when I'm sharing or when I'm doing workshops, it's just like, let's step into the space and see what needs to be shared.
And you know what? I believe it's always what someone needs to hear.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.